All right, so today we are looking at 9.1, which is the structures and function of the excretory system, also the urinary system. So the basic function of the excretory system is to regulate the volume and composition of body fluids by removing the wastes and returning the needed substances back to the body for reuse. So the problem of wastes. So waste is any substance that's produced by the body and is present in excess of the body's needs. So for example, carbon dioxide, excess water, ions like sodium, chloride, hydrogen, and compounds that result from the breakdown of proteins and nucleic acids. So any waste can pose a health threat if it's allowed to accumulate. Nitrogenous wastes such as ammonia, urea, and uric acid are very toxic. Ammonia is highly toxic, but it gets quickly converted to the less toxic compound called urea in the liver. And it's urea that makes up the majority of nitrogenous waste in the body, and about half of it gets eliminated in the urine. Uric acid is present in lower concentrations and also passes out of the body in the urine. So the solution to waste is excretion, which is the process of separating the wastes from the body fluids and eliminating them. So in the respiratory system, carbon dioxide is exhaled, small amounts of other gases, as well as water vapor. The skin excretes water, salt, and some urea in our perspiration. The digestive system excretes water, salts, lipids, and a variety of pigments and other cellular chemicals. The elimination of food residue or feces is not considered to be a process of excretion. Most metabolic wastes are dissolved or suspended in solution and are excreted by the excretory system, which is also called the urinary system. All right, so here we're looking at the structures of the excretory system. So you got these two kidneys, and from the kidneys we have these two tubes called the ureters. The ureters lead to this structure here, the bladder, and then the bladder leads to this singular tube, the urethra. So the human excretory system, you've got the two kidneys located symmetrically in the lower abdominal region on either side of the spinal cord, and they're the body's blood cleaners. All right, blood is going to go through the kidneys, get cleaned, and then return back to the body. It's the renal artery, which will bring the oxygenated blood to the kidney, and the renal vein will remove the deoxygenated blood. So these two blood vessels, they're going to deliver and move the large volume of blood necessary for efficient removal of the waste products. Each kidney is connected to this tube, the ureter, which connects to the bladder. And then the kidneys will release urine through the external environment, so to the outside through that tube, the urethra. All right, the bladder will temporarily hold or store the urine, and until there's a signal sent to your brain that it's full and you need to go to the washroom. All right, so these kidneys, they're about fist-sized, and there's two of them. They're located, like I said, lower back on each side of the spine. There's a large cushion of fat that surrounds the kidneys to protect them, and humans are capable of functioning with only one kidney. So if something happens like a car accident and maybe one gets damaged, or maybe if there's a disease or something and one gets damaged, humans are able to function with the only one kidney. What happens is that the single kidney will increase in size to handle that increased workload. All right, the ureter, two of them coming off of the kidneys, these two tubes here. So they're the tubes that conduct urine from the kidney to the bladder. From the ureters, urine is moved by peristaltic actions of smooth muscle tissue to the muscular urinary bladder, where it gets temporarily stored. Drainage from the bladder is controlled by two rings of muscles called sphincters. So there would be sphincter muscles here, which are not shown in this diagram. Both sphincters must relax before the urine can drain from the bladder. The innermost sphincter is involuntarily controlled by the brain, and it's during childhood that we learn to voluntarily control relaxation of the other sphincter. Urine will exit the bladder and the body through a tube called the urethra, shown here. In males, the urethra is about 20 centimeters long, and it merges with the vas deferens of the reproductive tract to form a single passageway to the external environment. In females, the urethra is only about 4 centimeters long, and the reproductive and our urinary tracts have separate openings. All right, so the organs of the excretory system: 2 kidneys, the 2 ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. Some vessels of the circulatory system are also shown here. We can see the aorta, we can see the inferior vena cava, which would lead to the renal artery. The word renal comes from the Latin word for kidney. So anytime you see the word renal, it's referring to the kidney. All right, so even though these vessels are not part of the excretory system, they are very intimately connected with it, right? Because they're providing the blood to the kidney and then removing the blood as well by the vein. All right, so here we can see the renal artery and then the renal vein in blue. All right, so the kidneys are the body's blood cleansers. Here we can see a cross section of the kidney, and it reveals 3 structures. There's an outer layer of connective tissue that is called the cortex. That's the outer layer here. The inner layer is the medulla. It's found beneath the cortex. So this here is the renal medulla. And then a hollow chamber called the renal pelvis, which is shown here. Okay, the renal pelvis joins the kidney with the ureter. So here's the ureter coming off of the kidney. All right, so here again in this diagram, we can see those 3 structures. We have the renal cortex on the outside. Here is the renal medulla. And then in this area here is the renal pelvis. We'll get into more details of what's happening internally, but here we can see in diagram A, we can also see some blood vessels to reinforce the connection between the circulatory and excretory system, right? Because it is the kidneys that are going to clean the blood. In the view for B and C, we don't see the blood vessels, and we can clearly see the 3 regions of the kidney: the renal cortex, the renal medulla, and then the renal pelvis. In diagram C, we can see now these structures here called the nephrons. These are the functional units of the kidney, and we'll take a look at them in greater detail in a bit here. Okay, so we'll stop here with the nephrons. So what we saw with the nephrons in this diagram here, these are the functional units of the kidney. They're embedded within the renal cortex and they extend into the renal medulla. And there's over 1 million of these structures, these nephrons. These structures, these nephrons, are the ones that are responsible for filtering various substances from the blood and transforming it into urine. And each nephron is organized into 3 main regions: a filter, a tube, and a duct. All right, so we're going to stop here today. We'll take a look at the nephron in more detail next class.